Greetings. My name is Francisco Aragon, and I direct Letras Latinas, the literary initiative at the University of Notre Dame's Institute for Latino Studies. Welcome to Curated Conversations, a Latinx poetry show. Today's program features Michael Torres in conversation with Diana Marie Delgado, discussing Michael's book, An Incomplete List of Names, which was selected by Raquel Salas Rivera for the National Poetry Series. Before I pass the baton to and introduce Diana Marie, I want to say a few thank yous. The Writers Center, in addition to being a co-presenter, is our host, and I want to give a shout out to Zach Powers, their Director of Communications. Zach designed the lovely webpage for the series at the Writers Center's website and is also our tech guru when it comes time to recording these conversations. I also want to thank Executive Director Margaret Melanie for her endorsement and support. My gratitude as well to the Writers Center's in-house publication, Poet Lore, with whom Letras Latinas collaborated a few years ago, specifically on our multi-year initiative, Pintura Palabra. A shout out as well to Angela Spring of Duende District, who handles the book-selling component of Curated Conversations and is another co-presenter. Finally, a program as ambitious as this one, which will involve 24 participants, would not be possible without funding. The Poetry Foundation is our principal institutional benefactor. In addition, I want to thank Jim Wilson, whose generous patronage is making possible a parallel book club activity for the debut books we'll be exploring throughout the year. In fact, the book club component for today's installment will be overseen by poet Alan Chasaro, whose brilliant book, Piñata Theory, is, in my view, in kinship with Michael's book. One of the special traits of Curated Conversations is that we ask the debut Latinx poet in question to have a hand in the selection of their interlocutor. In consultation with Michael, we have invited Diana Marie Delgado. Diana Marie and I go back quite a ways. I don't recall with precision the first time I met her, but I do remember an early conversation with her in the presence of Rigoberto Gonzalez. I also recall a memorable lunch in Manhattan, not far from Columbia University, at a place that she selected. And we also coincided in 2006 in San Antonio during a Macondo Writers Workshop. In 2010, Diana Marie Delgado was designated as the third recipient of the Letras Latinas Residency Fellowship for a writer working on their first book, for which she spent a month in residence at the Anderson Center in Red Wing, Minnesota. I also want to acknowledge and thank her for the lovely introduction she wrote for a chapbook published by Momotombo Press a number of years ago by a Chicano poet we both admire. That would be Fresno-raised poet and inaugural judge of the Andres Montoya Poetry Prize, Robert Vasquez. In preparing for today, I had the pleasure of revisiting her work, but somehow experiencing for the second time Tracing the Horse, her first full-length book published by BOA in 2019, offered me fresh pleasures and insights. I now see Diana Marie's work in kinship with an earlier interlocutor in this series, Dana Levin. What I mean by that is that Diana's art functions and flourishes as a compelling and moving filter through which to gaze and grapple with difficult subject matter, such as the incarceration of a family member or another family member's struggle with addiction. But there's more to it than that. It's also a poetry of seductive insinuation. Take these arresting opening lines from her poem, Desire is a Road. Spend enough time on your knees and you become sacred. My father, who palmed corsets, was like this. He'd shoot up, present something brilliant in his voice, then scratch his face, proclaim, not here. My mother, more taken with plans than results, thought him a find, hot like dice, hair trigger 2. One of the results of my latest encounter with this book is that it will be one of 5 first books I'll be teaching at Notre Dame in the fall. Please welcome Diana Marie Delgado.
Gracias, Francisco. Happy to be here with you and Michael. Francisco, really quickly, when you started going back to when we had met, I was like, oh, I hope I was on good behavior during those times, because you were going back to like 2010 in Manhattan, where I lived for quite some times. I'm super excited to talk to you, Michael, today about your book. I went ahead and just said, we had thought that I might do a little bit of an introduction, but I want to save a little bit of that more for our conversation, because I think there have been so many great and amazing things written about your book. But I do want to start off with just citing something that Raquel Salas Rivera wrote in the introduction for your book, the foreword, actually. And then maybe you'll read a few poems and then we can dive in. Cool. In the foreword, Raquel, one thing that I highlighted was they said, maybe I will say the masculinity in these poems is an ever-winding tenderness that it touches itself through distancing, forever trying to find out how much is house and how much is labyrinth. He did an amazing foreword for your book, and I was hoping that you could read a few poems and then we can begin.
Yeah, for sure. And thank you I'm really excited for this conversation. All right, I'll read a couple poems. The first one will be The Pachuco's grandson considers skipping school. I didn't want to be bad, but I wanted to be bad. Yesterday, someone threw a book at the sub's head. All I saw was a bird with paged wings. And today, when I walked into class, baggy jeaned, he took roll, but didn't call my name. That's how I knew I didn't have to answer no more. I became absence in my seat, asleep, became block letters for the name my homie bestowed. I dreamt chain links and angel wings, how to escape. At some point we were awake, yes, all the brown boys like me, and we carved our new names into desks in the shape of hearts. What a beautiful beating. We cut the tongues from our old shoes to stuff into new ones later, so they pop like a bullfrog puffs when it's in danger. No one to recognize us. We were more mustached than our mothers could manage. Before 5th period, some left. Through a window, my homies clicked chins, what's up, for me to come through. Don't let the wind between the branches fool you, their eyes said. Every looking out also implies enclosure. Out there, where I could be anything, I placed a silver chain around my neck, and it fit like a slipped halo. And the second one I'll read is, and it's interesting, Francisco mentioned like your collection and talking about like incarcerated family members. And that's like, for some reason, that was one I chose to read. The second one I chose to read today. So this one's, my brother is asking for stamps. Mm-hmm. And photos of me and my new wife. He's asking for pictures from the wedding. He's very sorry he couldn't make it. He can't wait to meet her. My brother is asking if I can call a warehouse office in Albuquerque and tell them Ray, his celly, is fine, and that Ray would like his old job back one day, if possible. My brother is asking for paper, asking for postage stamps, a few dollars on his JPay. It's June, it's July. He says it's not so bad in here. Says he's not getting institutionalized, won't get institutionalized, not like the others. He has TV. He reads a lot. My brother is asking for book 5, 6, or 12 of the Women's Murder Club series. It's May, it's March, it's May, it's October. Happy Halloween, brother. He's asking again for postage stamps, telling me he might be programmed, sure, but who isn't? We all need routine. He says that one time after chow, they let the guys stay out a little longer, and the guys looked at each other like, why aren't we being locked down yet? My brother says he's a confused mouse sometimes. Sometimes he won't go out for rec. Can't stand the fact that it's going to end. It's June. It's July. Happy birthday, brother. My brother is asking for stamps. He's ending every letter with a cartoon of himself, all homeboyed out, even though he wasn't like that before. It's like he'd grown an extra life in there, and the him I grew up with is closed until not this August. I know I shouldn't imagine him this way, but I will always be younger and looking up. That's my brother. He's asking for stamps. Outside, the leaves have turned without notice. It's the week when every walnut seems to be falling from the sky, and when I drive home, I run as many over as possible. It's June. Happy birthday. It's November. My brother says he'll write when he can. He knows I'm busy. Everyone's busy. It's August, and he's looking for stamps.
Wow. Amazing.
Thank you.
Your work is so familiar to me. I think that lends itself to sort of me feeling a little bit like I know you, even though we've actually never met. Through your work, through the relationships that you talk about in your book. One thing that you and I had, we kind of chatted a little bit about this conversation. And one of the things that we talked about was like us not necessarily making sure, but being aware that we wanted to talk to each other and like think about your book and sort of be in communication with one another in a way that wasn't sort of performing academia or performing this kind of like high level thinking. And I think I have an understanding of why that's of interest to me, but I wanted to know if maybe, you know, where that came from for you. Cause we kind of like out of nowhere, we came to that, like we started talking about it and we're like, let's dress down. Let's kind of just be ourselves. And I think I just want to know kind of like, more, like maybe we should talk a little bit about that, because I think for me, that's important. And I think it's also important for you. And out of nowhere, we landed there, right? Like we just kind of talked about that without kind of like really like dissecting that. So I just wanted to know if maybe we can start there.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like I felt comfortable enough to like talk about that, or I don't know who brought it up when we started talking about it, but like, I think that was just from like having read your book, because we've not even met in person yet, but like, I think like I could see from your work and the work that I am doing, or, you know, in the book, is that like, there's a certain level of like, it's like, we don't want to exclude anyone. And I think in my mind and in my upbringing, higher education was always like, it seemed exclusive. And even though like I'm in that, you know, realm now teaching, like I never want the book to do that. And I never want to come across that way. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know, like there's something about, I want like, I think I always hope that people who aren't, you know, already poetry readers, or people who think that like poetry is something that they might not like, I want them to actually like read the book, or I want them to come to like this conversation and not feel like, this is something we mentioned, I think, not feel like they have to look up, like not like they have to have the dictionary next to them, right? Like I want them to feel like, you know, that we could be talking to them at like a party, like at a barbecue, and we could be talking about these things, right? Yeah. And
for sure.
Yeah, it's just like this comfort kind of thing to me.
Yeah, I think that one of the things that sort of came up that I thought a lot about was like, and I think that I failed sometimes in doing this, is like, I didn't want anybody to have an MFA to read my book. And I think that that's like a significant way to sort of enter the page and be on the page, is to acknowledge and be, like you said, like not exclude. And I think that happens in your book. Can you talk a little bit about Pomona, right? Like, I think that there's like a lot of writers that are part of this like little miniature diaspora that is part of SoCal. And like, I made a list of some of them before I got on with you. It's like going way back. It's like Mari Sala Norte, Gary Soto, Sarah Borjas, Juan Felipe Herrera, Joseph Diaz, Luis Rodriguez, Jose Hernandez Diaz, Joseph Rios, and then Alan Chisara, that like I haven't picked up their book, but I've heard a lot about them. And I guess, can you talk a little bit about Pomona, and then maybe talk a little bit about where you think you land with those other writers?
Yeah, I mean, so Pomona, now that like the book is out, like I always thought like I was just writing to home and to my homies who were there, but now like Pomona is like, because of the book, everywhere with me, like it goes everywhere with me. But I don't know, like Pomona was always, Pomona to me is very like, and the way I interpreted it was like it was like a very masculine place. Like it was like a very, like all the descriptors were like, it was gritty, it was hood, it was tough, it was like they would say the ghetto and things like that. When I was growing up, like those were things that like I wanted to be really proud of, and I was proud of that, and I was proud to be of that place. And then at a certain point, when I was like, I don't know, maybe in my early mid-20s, Pomona started, like people started talking about it, or like people maybe like when I got further out of the city and I like my world kind of grew, the way they talked about Pomona sort of changed. Like it was hood and it was like ghetto, but like it was bad all of a sudden, and I didn't like that because like my best friends are from there. I had a great childhood there. Like things happened, but like I don't know, and I felt really like I always wanted to be very loyal to the place, and for me, how to do that was to always like write honestly about it. And I would never want to, and I say Pomona, but I also mean my homies who are in the poems, right? And like if I ever criticize, or if I was ever critical of something of Pomona or something of them, I was also making sure that like I was there too to be criticized, because I didn't want it to be like, I always want to be connected somehow and really close to the place. Yeah. And I love like seeing that in the work of like Alan Chasaro and Jose Hernandez Diaz and Luis J. Rodriguez. You mentioned him, and his was like Always Running was like the first. That was the book that got me kind of really started. Like it was a really important book for me. But to see like, like to see and know that like my contemporaries are like dudes I can call my homies, like, and Sarah too, like all these fools are like it's really exciting because like, I'm not like lonely in this space. You know what I mean? Like, cause coming up, there were certain authors that were like easily available to me. We mentioned that in our brief conversation, is why like Charles Bukowski was like a huge influence at first, because like I would go to Barnes and Noble and I would find like, I would find all the Bukowski books. I would see like, the selected Gary Soto or Elements of San Joaquin, and I would see that and I would pick it up, but I would see like all these other things. So to come up and like finally, I suppose, arrive in a space where like you're here, and Sarah and Joseph Rios and like all these like people who like, some of them I went to school with, right? Like I was in undergrad when Sarah was in grad school at Riverside, and like to be here now and not feel lonely about it. Like it's so great just to have that community. And there's so many things like Letras Latinas, like Canto Mundo, that like helped, shape that all. But like, I love it. I love that I can have like, I want to say like these hood ass conversations about poetry. Like I love it.
Yeah.
And I don't have to sound, I don't know. I don't have to use the word dichotomy or something.
Yeah.
If I want to, I can, but I don't have to.
No, I think that one of the things is like the books are speaking to each other. And there's a sense of community, even in sort of those like distinctions, because Pomona, even Riverside, like is really far from like where I grew up, which is La Puente West Covina area. Yeah. But I think that there was so much overlap there that it does seem like we're all part of that, including Rigoberto Gonzalez, like all of those people that really kind of paved the way for us to kind of now multiply. It seems like there's so much good writing coming out. One thing that I wanted to bring up, I think we talked about Larry Levis
Yeah.
a little bit. And Larry was also somebody who was influential in my own path as a writer. But one of the things I wanted to point out, you talked about being seen, right? Or like seeing yourself in these other writers. And I think Larry Levis in his poem, The Poet at 17, was one of the first times that I even heard anybody mention Mexican in a poem. There's a part in the poem where he talks about, like in the Poet at 17, the vines must have seemed like cages to the Mexicans who were paid 7 cents a tray for the grapes.
Yeah.
And I remember reading that and being like, oh, Larry's down with like the Chicanos? Like,
Yeah.
okay, like he's, and I guess, did you have a poem like that where you either felt seen either as the speaker was seeing you, or maybe someone else was seeing your community when you first began writing?
Larry's definitely, but also I'm trying to think. I have like a stack of books that I keep like on a particular shelf that are the books where I think I saw myself. There are so many. I mentioned Luis J. Rodriguez in the Always Running memoir, but also Lorna D. Cervantes in Emplumada. I saw myself there. And also Sonia Sanchez's Homegirls and Hand Grenades. I remember the moment when I was in community college and a professor, we had it was like an English class. It was like a really small poetry unit, but a professor noticed that I was really interested. And she was like, oh, you have to check out this book called Homegirls and Hand Grenades. And I had not heard of Sonia Sanchez yet at that point. But I remember thinking whoa, that's a title for a book. I got to find this book. That was just I couldn't believe that could be a title for a book. And and I think, my favorite poem out of that whole collection it's called Norma. It's like a longer prose poem, but it's like the story of the speaker and looking back at this friend Norma, who was really smart, but didn't end up making it through high school or through grade school. And I was like, oh, that's what happened to some homies of mine. And I'm this speaker and I don't pity these people. I feel bad about the entire societal situation. But Sonia Sanchez just distilled it in this prose poem. And I was I was just so, I was like, oh, you can do that. That was I saw myself, which also sort of allowed me permission or a go ahead, I want to try that now. So that was a big deal to me, was that book for sure.
Where did you go to community college?
Mount San Antonio Community College.
I was there too for a long time.
I was there for a long time too.
I was just hanging out. I don't know. I was taking floral design and all these other classes. I was trying to find my way. That's so funny that you went there too. I was there for maybe a decade because I always worked. I ended up going in a little bit later, where I graduated from high school. I did okay, not good. And I was like, I'm going to work full time. And then I was working full time at a medical office. I was like, this really sucks, this full time job thing. And then I went into Mount SAC, and there was such, there were gente there. There was such an embrace of the Mexican American community, the literature. There were classes specific to Mexican American literature there. Yeah. And that's how I began sort of opening my mind to the idea that maybe I could do that. So it's interesting that you were there too, and that kind of opened your mind to that.
Yeah, I was there for 7 years, and I too sort of wandered around trying to figure out what do I even want to major in. And I feel I took this class called History of Rock and Roll, which sounds really easy. I took it twice because I got an F the first time because I did not care because I was working full time too, right? And it was I was working full time and going there part time. And for me, it was I just happened to take a poetry class. Because it seemed like a fun class and I wanted an easier semester. And there was a creative writing club starting up. And then from that point on, once I got in that little community, it was at a really special time that it started growing, and there was like an annual thing, and then like that spun out into all these other things that I didn't know existed, which were just open mics around in Walnut, in Pomona, and like all around.
Yeah.
And so I was really fortunate to, I mean, I don't know, I kind of waded in the water for a bit, but like, you know, professors there, John Brenningham and Lloyd Aquino, like they were really there to support the students. I mean, because, you know, community college, you could just be like lost for a long time because you're working full time. A lot of people have kids and family. And so, yeah, that was a really sort of very supportive, like in a moment where I really needed it.
Yeah, no, I think that that's one of the benefits of it, is that you get to kind of explore, and you're not sort of, you know, just throwing the money in the air.
Yeah.
Talk, you know, the open mic thing, that's something that is also, that I kind of experienced something over in downtown Pomona with Corey Bestcap. And I don't know if you want to just sort of talk about that. Like that was, it seemed like such, I can't believe that you also know him and like all were part of that. Cause I was too. And just to give people a sense of what that was and how it impacted your work, maybe even now.
Yeah. So, I started going to the open mic was called the Mike and Dim Lights, right?
Yeah.
And I started going there because I had this homegirl that I worked with at the mall, and we also went to community college together, and she lived in those artist lofts above the wine cafe that was across from where the open mic was. And so then she learned that I was into poetry and she was too. So she invited me and like to go there, and it was like it changed everything, like because before all that, everything that was like poetry and writing was like in a book, and I had not been to I don't think I'd ever been to like a reading of an author who had a book at that point yet. But like there were like local stars there, and that would like feature, and like I could see them. I would sit up there, you know, sometimes in the back with my hoodie, sometimes in the front, like, you know, and like I would see them there, and then they would have copies of their chapbooks, and I would get them signed, and like it was like electric, and it was like right there for me. And they were like my age, they were younger than me. They were like, it was like really something powerful, especially because it was like the spoken word was performative, and I wanted to do that. And so like everything before seemed so like I'm going to keep mentioning Luis J. Rodriguez, but even reading his book, he seemed like a couple degrees separated from me because he had a book and I had not met him yet. But these people at this open mic were there. Like I would talk to them after, you know what I mean? And so and then from then on that point, like I just started going to all these open mics and all, you know, like in Santa Monica and Venice, Long Beach. And it really made me think a lot about a reader or audience member's attention, and how you always want to have, you know, something very concise to kind of like keep their attention, because, you know, at open mics like that, like if you think something's whack, you could be like, boo, you know what I mean? Like, and then that's how you know. And I really love that actually, because I just seeing those like stars who were stars to me, those spoken word artists, like it made me want to be better too.
Yeah, you know, all of that is bringing back a lot of memories. I remember seeing Rachel McKibbins perform at, and being like, okay, I'm going to see this performance. And then just being like, damn, like I got a lot of work to do. Because so much of it is performative in theater. And I also was fortunate enough to go to some house party with all these other writers and poets out in Riverside. And it was in the small room, and they shut down all the lights. And then all of a sudden Saul Williams performs. And, you know, at the moment, I just didn't know enough, right? I didn't have money to buy books. I didn't have any of those things. But I just remember just feeling how much that was like when you go and see a play, right? Where I think poetry readings are just different. Like I host so many poetry readings at the Poetry Center, and some of them really kind of like, they're moving, but they're moving in a different way. And that's always been something I thought a lot about, like, how do you kind of bring that energy so it isn't so sort of from this traditional sort of academic, the lectern and all this other stuff to take it to a different level and encapsulate that. And I personally haven't been able to do that, but it's interesting that that's also your background as well.
Yeah, that's funny you mentioned Saul Williams. I remember around that time I bought his book, Said the Shotgun to the Head.
Yeah.
And because I was just like, because I heard of him through all those channels and was like just seeking out all that work. I remember I featured one time at Mike and Dim Lights, like close to when I was about to graduate from Riverside. And like, I wanted to make it fun and performative, but I also felt like if it was just me the whole time, that would be boring. And like, I ended up doing like a weird sort of like, it was almost like a variety show where I had one homie like play a guitar while I like, did spoken word. Then I had another homie like tell a story of how we met. And it was just like all these things going on that because I couldn't like, I was like, I don't want to just like memorize and then perform. Like, I don't know. I wanted it to be very like live and alive, like I think, I don't know. I just want people to like feel good about it and not just like go, like.
Yeah. I mean, do you memorize your poems? Do you have any of your poems memorized?
You know what? No. And I don't know what that says now about how I've sort of like I try to perform them in a certain way, but I've not, I've relied on the page since then, since like, when I moved away, is like, there weren't really spoken word spots that I knew of that were, especially ones that were like in Cali, in Minnesota.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, we could talk about that more. I want to talk a little bit about the way you make your poems. Like I think now I have a good understanding of sort of like how you landed in poetry, like what were your influences, and how you came to the page. But I want to know if you're up to chatting about it a little bit more about like how you make your poems. Like I'm like so obsessed with like process, because everyone's process is different. And one thing that stood out to me were the in the very beginning of the book, the All-American Mexican, like those poem, which kind of they resurged throughout the book. And I thought it was pretty fucking incredible how you would have sort of a block of prose, you would have a space, and then you would have a smaller block. Like they're almost like chunked up. Yeah. And then they bottleneck, and then it turns into this other thing, and it's really amorphous. And I just wondered how that came to. It seems so simple once it's on the page, but I wonder if there's like a tricky, something that happened to you that made you decide on that, or like what happened.
Yeah. So those 3 poems, they were written originally as part of like a chapbook. Once I thought the manuscript was done and I was like, I'm going to send it out. Now I need to work on a new project. And I just started, I don't remember what the idea was, but I started writing what would become the All-American Mexican Poems into this like failed chapbook that I wrote for the Gloria Anzaldúa chapbook prize. And it was like, got rejected and everything. But like, but what happened was like, because I thought, oh, these are so different from the manuscript. And then, after a year or so, I was like, oh, they're actually talking to each other and doing interesting things. But I think the All-American Mexican ones were dealing with identity in a way that the other poems hadn't. They were very like, the speaker was very like upset and very aggressive about the way he thought about living in Minnesota and missing home. And there was a lot of that sort of identity crisis in there. And so when I started to form when I started to like lineate the actual poem, what I did was like, I boxed in the margins, and I think I only like allowed a few inches, and then I would justify the text. And then what I would do is then like, if I were like, instead of just a stanza break, I would do a box somewhere else, because I wanted like this idea that the poem itself is wrestling with with being boxed in and and sort of like categorized. And then another way that I started thinking about it was that like, like when you've seen display cases of butterflies, and there's there's just like, there's big ones, there's little ones. And like, I imagine I started seeing the words sort of like that, and they were all
Oh,
like boxed up. And like, because like there was a poem, I think it's the first All-American Mexican poem, where it talks about that something about we caged our laughter like the way you cage a butterfly or something. And I thought about that idea
yeah.
of like trying to wrestle these words down and like put them in a certain frame as a way to speak about like this struggling with masculinity and identity, or like living with masculinity now that my speaker is also like a professor, you know what I mean? And so like,
Yeah.
that was kind of how I saw those poems, because they were all three of them were dealing with that sort of navigation.
That's so interesting, like the framework. I think one of the things has been, whenever I look at things that are sort of not just lineated and, you know, the lines broken, people often take from either visual arts or from like other genres that are completely different in order to create something that like pushes against the parameters of what we think is a poem really is, or what it should look like. So I love that you kind of brought in this visual element. One part of the poem that I read it and I was like, yes, I've been there so many times. And I think that many people who have gone through the process of assimilation are not even, you know, I don't even know if we're, you know, I think one thing, I'm going to go on a tangent. Like, I think one thing that I find problematic about assimilation is that we never get to be fully assimilated in, you know, in, I don't even know what to call them, in the white community's eyes. And
Mm-hmm.
you know, we're still othered even in those communities.
Yeah.
So it's this painful sort of thing where you're above both things and you have to watch, right? It's like that
Mm-hmm.
double consciousness.
Yeah.
But you talk about it where you say, the other me floats between the professor and the glass, not wondering what this man thinks of my use of the word dichotomy. Did I say it right? I'm well, thank you. I'm good at being American.
Yeah.
And I think I'm going to go on another thing, and then I'm going to land it with you, because I have so many thoughts about that, right? Like, your whole book is about that and it explores that. But I think this idea of being a good American, right? What it means to be Chicano, what it means to be Mexican American, what it means to still not be accepted no matter how much we perform whiteness, or sort of the dominant culture's expectations of what it means for us to now be educated people who are now in their sort of community. So I guess I wonder what you think about that, and like when you were writing this book, and if you feel like you explored it enough, or if there was anything that you left out of the book.
I don't know if I left anything out. I mean, here's the thing, like, I'll probably end up going back to it the longer I live in Minnesota, which is probably going to be a lot longer, because I feel like, I don't know if I'm necessarily conscious of trying to actively resist assimilation, but I feel like there's a desire I want people to assimilate to the way I am. I don't know if that makes sense. Like, for example, like, I want to go in a department meeting and be able to call my colleague this fool, like this fool right here. Like, I want to be able to say those things instead of like the other way around, because I don't think assimilation has a conclusion. Like, I don't think you just finish with it, right? And so maybe because of that thought or belief, then I'll probably always be writing these like poems where I'm grappling with that sort of, like you said, the double consciousness. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think because I was not trying to write those All-American Mexican poems for the book, it gave me the freedom to be honest about something that's really hard to admit, which is that, like, sometimes we're always tired because we're always having to go back and forth in the same moment. And there's something I don't know, there's something really like exhausting about that's exhausting, basically.
For sure. There's like a code switching, right? It's like you're code switching constantly, and you're able to kind of move between the two different worlds. But there's also another observer, like a third. It's like the Trinity. It's like you as you were, you as performing, and then the observer of all of these actions. And I think that that is exhausting. And I think we do it without even being aware of it. And this is a book that your book really captures that in such an amazing, fluent way that I was like, yes, thank you for saying that. Because I just think it's something that we all encounter. And I think we all sort of adjust or even maladjust for out of survival. Right.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like we're always like, we're being spliced into a bunch of different selves and a bunch of because now what I've been thinking of lately too is like, okay, like who I am in Minnesota is not who I am in California, but who I am in California is not who I used to be in California. Like when I go back home now, I'm a professor, and so I don't there's times I trip out and think like, and it doesn't ultimately matter because my best friends are my best friends, but like in my mind I go, how, like, who do they want me to be? They don't care. But like in my mind, I'm like, do they want me to be Michael, the professor? Do they want to be maybe Mikey, their homie? Do they want me to be a mix of the two? Like, is there something new again that I have to, you know what I mean? Am I spliced again? It's like really just a weird, complicated thing to just be thinking about. And I'm thinking about that a lot. I'm like, I can't get away from the idea of identity and naming and like the way someone sees themselves, even if I'm writing something like fictional and I'm just experimenting or nonfiction or whatever, I'm always thinking about perception.
So much more to say about that, especially when you leave where you're at, but you're writing about that place. I think that there's a certain spaciousness that occurs that gives you sort of distance to see you again, sort of above yourself. And I recently went back home, I guess after, much thought, I went back home to my mom's house. She lives over in West Covina, La Puente, it's off Amar and Temple. And it was this thing where, I show up, my brothers have bongs out, or, everybody, we're barbecuing. There's just like a different sense of leisure there and community. And then, I remember when I lived in New York, it was like a completely different thing and kind of like juxtaposed, like sometimes it would be exhausting. And I would be like, okay, well, who am I really? Like underneath all of it, like, who am I really? So yeah. I can't wait for you to write more poems about that.
Thank you. Yeah. I mean, I had like another reading or something where someone asked that question, like which one are not in like a confrontational way, but they were asking like earnestly, like, when are you authentic? When is which self is the authentic self? And I was like, all of them, like to be always, negotiating, to be confused, to be frustrated, to be comfortable, is all of it is true and real, like all of those things together. And I don't know, I also just, there's a side note, but I love that you said that you named Amar and Temple. Like, I love that. I was like, oh, I know like those, the train tracks, the gravel roads and those things. Like, I loved it.
Yeah. I've always dreamt of writing a poem that is just all the street names of my community, right? Like a list poem. It doesn't really, and hopefully I'll be able to figure it out. But I love this idea of cataloging, of indexing, of indices, of mapping, of creating a constellation of the places that we've been through or like the scenes in our life. And I think that's something that I found like in your book, where it's like, it's almost like you're giving me directions of what it means to be the speaker. You're giving me directions on like how to get to this other place, like it's so much of a neighborhood.
Yeah.
And I love that about the work. You talked a little bit about sort of exploring, and I think you said something about fiction. Do you write in other genres, or do you hope to write in other genres?
Yeah. Right now I'm working sort of on like a bigger nonfiction project. And I feel like everything I'm working on right now is like at beginning stages. So I have some poems in the works. I have some nonfiction in the works that I go back to. But like, I feel like the nonfiction I'm working on is somehow helping me access certain certain themes and content of poetry that I wasn't ready to write about
Yeah. Yeah.
in this first book. And I like the way they're sort of like working. I always dream of writing something like a large fiction project. Shit, I just want to get paid sometimes, so I want to write a novel.
Oh,
but
hell
like,
yeah. I think it's on all of our minds, right? Like teaching
yeah.
only goes so far, right?
Yeah, but I don't know. Like, the idea of like planning and plotting a novel is like weird to me. Like, it seems like I get bored of my own plot and self, like trying to write really shitty dialogue, which is what I do. But I think it'd probably be something character driven, which is like that's probably why my poems are always like most of them are narrative, because there's a character that I'm really interested in them finding their way through some sort of tension or idea that they just can't let go of, and I'm interested in that. And that's probably what it would be in fiction, but nonfiction is what I'm mostly working on right now.
Uh-huh.
Some poems.
You know, I'm part of like I'm part of a bunch of writing groups, but like I think one of the funny jokes is like, oh, you're just going to write one of those poet novels, right? Because like the poet novels are never, there's always something experimental. There's no plot point. There's like it's like braided. That it's like there's just so many different ways to kind of encounter it. And I'm like, but those are my favorite things, right? Like I love the traditional sort of like James Baldwin, Giovanni's Room, Gatsby. Like I love all those things, first person, like kind of like arc, plot point thing. But I'm also all about like, like Eileen Miles has Inferno, a novel, and it's like, it's like a poet's novel, but it's one of those things where I think that to me is most interesting. And it's the best way to kind of create a space for somebody who's been trained as a poet to kind of engage not only the reader, but themselves.
Yeah. I mean, I'm all for like spinning it in a different direction. And like, because I don't know, like I'm okay with not wanting to try to write a very traditional novel, even if the reason is because I don't know how. Like I want to approach it in my way, and maybe make it new. And then I'll jump into I respect all the other sort of traditional novels, but I just want to I want to be able to get the project done. And if I have to come in through a back poetry door, then that's exciting. That's like really exciting, actually.
I agree. One of them, Anne Carson talks a lot about, different shapes and like of writing. And, I think the most successful ones are where the book shape creates a space for what you need to say. Right? And then when that happens, the reader, there's a way of engaging with the reader in an authentic way, right? Because there's a reason behind it. And that's something that's been on my mind a lot about trying to think about what a second book looks like, which I think that's what you're doing. Like you're kind of exploring and discovering and touching different textures of what it means to continue on as a writer.
Yeah. Right after the book came out, I was like, I wanted to, and this never happened because I always like jotting notes, but I was like, I want to step back and walk away from poetry and do all these other things and see that if I can find my own way back, you know what I mean? And see how and see how I do that. And and also what I've been interested in with poetry is the idea, and maybe just in my other writing, is the idea of capacity, which is like to say, what is a poem capable of? Like, what's the capaciousness of a poem? Can it do these things that people might say, you can't make a poem out of that? You know what I mean? I love that. And I don't know, I feel like, I don't know if I'm embarrassed to admit, but part of it is because now that I have a book, I have been more willing to accept the idea that I am a poet, which is in itself, as we've sort of touched on, a really weird thing to be like, I am a poet, like this person is a poet. But that identity that I've sort of accepted has in a way given me this sort of like, why the fuck not? Like, why, let me just fucking try this,
For sure.
and see all the ways I fail, and then one way that might work, and then I run with that because I've done it before and I could probably do it again. It might take like, I don't know, 10 years or who knows, but I trust that I will try to seek that out more. And I trust wherever I'm going to go more now than maybe I did when I was, I don't know, first starting out.
Yeah, I think, what you're talking about is really, it's like, it makes me like excited, and I get like I get excited about it because it's about like your growth as a writer, right? Like you're putting your growth as a writer first before like, I need to hurry up and finish this. So like you're pulling that along to finish this thing, but you're actually prioritizing your own growth and evolution as a writer. And that is really like, that's where the real fucking art comes out, right? That's when you stand back and it's like you create something and you're like, I didn't even know I was doing this. And then it's like this thing, but you brought up this thing about like, what are the limitations, right? Like, or it made me think of like, what are the limitations of the genre that I'm working in? And how can I be aware of those? And how can I like kind of mess with them a bit for my own sort of advantage? And one thing that when I was writing my first book is I thought a lot about was I love scary stuff, both like on film or like not gory, like real like demon, El Diablo, like this girl showed up, the devil showed up, like just all this stuff that kind of I've been like these folk tales that my family would tell me. And I thought a lot about like, I've never read a poem that scared me. Right. Like, and whenever I brought that up to other people, they're like, oh, read this poem about these witches by John Frost. And I'm like, I don't know, that kind of doesn't scare me. You know what I mean? Like, like they're like, this is like a really scary poem. And that's something that I've also like through sort of the process that you described, like, thinking more about like, well, that's a limitation of the thing, or is it, right? Like, and how can I kind of tease that or like be aware of it when I engage to create something different with that awareness?
Yeah. I don't know if this will be true for you, but like part of me wonders about myself if like, if my first book was in some way an offering to home and homies, as a way of saying, because I've described the book as one part love letter, one part breakup letter, but I wonder if it was a sort of offering to then feel okay with saying, now I'm going to do these really weird things.
Yeah.
And like, because I gave you this, but I don't know, like that's the way I sort of think about it sometimes and wonder if that's a true thing or not. But like, and it's just also probably to surprise myself and to, like you said, grow as a writer. But I just want to do like things that maybe someone before might have said, you can't do that in a poem, or I might have told myself not to. And I want to just try those things. Yeah. Right. That scary ass poem.
Yeah. Like, I think that's part of it is sort of like you've said a few things that I really connect with. One of them is sort of like, there's kind of like this underlying responsibility to share what you've seen or what you've experienced on behalf of those who cannot express it.
Yeah.
Or who might never, ever be able to tell their story, right? If you think of all the people that are in the book that you wrote, but won't ever really be able to tell their story, and you then give it to us. And then I also just think of like, how do we then break out of that shell that we've created for ourselves of what readers or, we even expect of ourselves? How do we even do that in an even bigger way that is to the advantage of us as long-term, right? Like long-term writers in this game, artists, really. So yeah, I'm with you with that.
Yeah, that's something I didn't think about before the first book, is that like now I'm thinking like, the next book, but also I'm thinking like, not really the next book, but I'm thinking like the next sort of movement of me as a writer. But I'm thinking of the next, 10, 20 years, and like, what will that be? When at first, when you're writing the first book, I feel like I was just concentrating so hard in the first book. I sort of like fantasized about other projects, but like not in the way that I'm thinking seriously about myself as a writer, as an artist now. Like, I don't know,
Yeah.
it's different, I guess. Yeah.
No, that makes sense. Do you have any new work that you'd like to close out with, that you feel like you want to maybe talk a little bit about, maybe and share something with us before we end our conversation, which has been amazing, by the way.
It was great. Thank you very
I
much.
feel like we can talk forever, or at least I can.
We can always start talking about Cali and like Holt Boulevard and all the streets.
We're gonna have to put together a reading with every, like with all the different. It would be cool to have all the different generations.
Yeah.
And just kind of have some sort of like, I don't know, reading like that. That would be really cool to organize.
I'd love that. Yeah. Yeah. I got a poem. This is like, I have like just several drafts of things, but this is like one of the first solid things that it's like weird it's like in the direction of capacity that I've been thinking about, but also, it sort of picks up where the book left off, which will make sort of more sense when I read it. But yeah, I'll read the poem. Yeah, it's called Obad, Desiring to be an Ars Poetica, with a release date inside it. My brother in the backyard, sleeping hours after he gets out. This image of him, and there I am, far beyond it. At a desk I've placed next to a window because of this life I've chosen. With my pen and a sheet of paper, let me start again. It's early morning and my brother sleeps on the cement in the backyard. I don't know why. I don't know what I think this poem can do for my soundless brother, but my pen on the page, where the image I've created of a brother alone with his sleep begins to draft also a ladder against the wall for my quiet brother to climb in the sweats he came home in. Once he wakes, awake, brother. My mother asks what he's doing there, and there she is, my mother at the kitchen window overlooking the yard and the street beyond our house. Yellow plastic gloves hang over the faucet in front of her. They drip soap water right next to my lack of imagination. I've always placed my mother kitchen busy when all she wants to do is read a novel on the couch before getting ready for bed. She's been made to search each situation for what's better, for what can be navigated. She dries her hands and calls to tell me my brother is home now. Finally, I haven't realized if this poem is about my own brother stirring towards chance or what my mother wishes for. One day, I called everyone to the front and announced that I was going to become a poet. Everyone nodded and then hurried back inside. Everything was good for a long while. I grew strong, took out loans I intended to forget, piled up memories onto each page and felt sufficient. But look now, there is the morning, miles out. It approaches my brother, my slim brother who is about to blink, just like in a fable. My brother will wake up. He must. My mother can't find her glasses. She goes outside, offers my brother a basket of oranges she hopes he holds like a chalice. I write small clouds, and there they pass above him. Every star exits on a blue string.
Wow.
Thank you.
Michael. Amazing work. Like, I'm just excited to read whatever it is that you have, other than this like amazing poem that you shared. But it's been awesome just to talk with you and learn more about your practice, learn more about what, you have in store, what's upcoming, and also just like a little bit more about your roots. It's been beautiful to talk to you.
It's been great. I can't wait to like meet you.
I know. I agree. We're going to have to do it on the front lawn in front of a barbecue or something.
Oh, I'm down. In Cali. Has to be in Cali.
Yeah. Let's do that.